Welcome back, everybody. I keep thinking about the Data Diver. I feel like it's going to be one of those things that I just keep coming back to on this channel. The fact that Steel Wool intentionally made this thing to look like the Faz-Wrench, going so far as to say that it's more than a passing resemblance to the Faz-Wrench, that this was intentional, to me that tells us a lot. Essentially, this tool, depending on which ending you think is canon, has the power to change the entire story of the Mimic. But let's first quickly talk about the ending where the building is up in flames, Mimic chases us, Mimic grabs the Data Diver, credits roll. Personally, I'm not sure that I think that this ending actually happens at this point. It's very likely to change, but the reason I don't understand that ending exactly is simply due to the Mimic walking away with the Data Diver. If this Data Diver is intentionally supposed to call us back to the Faz-Wrench, I think there's something more going on here. The Faz-Wrench shouldn't exist if the Mimic took the Data Diver. Unless, of course, the Mimic is captured at some later date that we have yet to fill in, I genuinely don't understand why or how we end up with it in Help 1 and 2, and how Cassie stumbles upon it in Ruin. I'm sure there's more to the story if this ending is canon though, so I'm not saying it isn't. But going off of how I currently see things, it genuinely seems more likely that Arnold successfully rebooted the David robot, the David Mimic, and kept the Data Diver. He's already on horrible terms with the Fazbear brand at this point, and after this night that he's gone through, things are even more crazy. And if Dispatch does get a hold of him, we learn that in another ending they are already mad at him for not answering them when it's clearly not his fault, and they fire him anyway. So to me it seems like that after this whole experience, there's no way Arnold's going to just give this thing up, especially realizing how dangerous and powerful it can be in the wrong hands. There are a lot of questions and theories to discuss what happens after this then, but I want to call our attention to a few more things concerning the Data Diver itself and what that might imply. First, at this point, I personally think that the Data Diver literally is the Faz-Wrench. It's just been repurposed for whatever the heck is going on in Ruin. One reason being that we never see any other Faz-Wrenches in Security Breach or Ruin. This is the only one. You'd think that in Security Breach at least we might stumble upon some of these. All the other access cards and whatnot can be found just fine in Security Breach, so you'd think we'd stumble upon some of these somewhere, but we don't. Not a single other one that I know of. The implications of that are really interesting. Does this mean the owner of the Faz-Wrench was the one that set up all these security nodes in Ruin, keeping the Mimic out? In the back of my mind, I guess I always assumed Gregory and Vanessa set up all the security nodes and whatnot in Ruin, or Gregory and somebody, but now I'm not so sure. The fact that the Faz-Wrench is the only key to deactivating all the security, to me seems to imply that the owner of the Faz-Wrench is the one who would have been responsible for setting all this up. Arnold is clearly tied to the Mimic regardless of which ending happens in Secret of the Mimic, and if he doesn't die in the game, he's definitely going to want to keep the dangerous aspect of the Mimic locked away. Which might imply that the David Mimic is triggered back into its violent ways at some point down the line. This makes for so many juicy theories, but anyway, there are a few other important takeaways from the Data Diver and Faz-Wrench itself. I'm using the words interchangeably at this point. One of the things I want to first talk about is the bobblehead that shows up in Secret of the Mimic that was given to like FNAF, Doggo, etc. But before we start on that, I want to quickly address the elephant in the room, and that is the fact that Cassie says this Faz-Wrench looks just like her dad's. Now, either this is a completely unrelated detail, or this could literally be Cassie's dad's Faz-Wrench. And if it is Cassie's dad's Faz-Wrench, then is it out of the question to present the idea that Arnold is Cassie's dad? But if I've lost you at this point, hold on. Let's dig a little further into why this is actually a serious question. So I want to go back to the Golden Bonnie bobblehead again. I personally think that this bobblehead is significant, and that it's trying to tie us back to FNAF 3 in a way. What I mean by that is the bobbleheads we see in the office from FNAF 3, where our characters going through their shift, are the same style of collectible as this Golden Bonnie bobblehead is. And the reason that's important is because that character could very possibly be the same character we're playing as in Secret of the Mimic. Why would I think that though? To answer that, Cassie's dad is a Five Nights at Freddy's merch collector. From lunchboxes to being connected to a Bonnie mask, Cassie's dad loves FNAF merch. Bonnie was my dad's favorite, as Cassie says. We also find things in Ruin like FNAF coins/tokens, and they're described as old and outdated, a collector's item. So as Cassie's going through her journey in Ruin, it almost seems like a lot of the collectibles she's finding seem to relate to her dad's hobby. FNAF 3 bobbleheads being brought to the building of FNAF 3 is classic collector behavior. Trust me, I would know. A collector bringing a few of his items with him to his job and setting some on his desk would be quite normal. In the same way, having a bobblehead in your vehicle would be the same type of thing. This could just be like something that Fazbear has in their vehicle, but as you can see, there isn't one in this fan, only in this one, which I think is interesting. And so to go along with this, the fact that Steel Wool sent this super rare Golden Bonnie bobblehead to some of these Five Nights at At Freddy's YouTubers is such a classic collector type of thing to do. See, collectors love tracking down really rare items, so if Cassie's dad is a huge FNAF collector, this item would be amazing to him. But that may not be the connection Steelwool is going for, I just thought I'd point it out. For now though, let's continue. But another huge connection tying Cassie's dad to FNAF 3 is the wall code we type in, which is 395248. This is the same number that shows up on the back of the Faz-Wrench that Cassie finds in Ruin, and it's the same Faz-Wrench that we wield in Help Wanted 2. So if we really are playing as Cassie's dad in Help Wanted 2, as well as Secret of the Mimic, all of this connects nearly seamlessly. It may even end up tying into the idea of how Arnold finds this FNAF 3 map that's been created down in Edwin's prototype area. But let's talk a bit more about the Faz-Wrench. The Steelwool boxes sent to YouTubers brought up an interesting possibility that the employee might have kept their data diver, almost like they were foreshadowing that someone might not give the data diver back. It's supposed to be returned, but what if the employee didn't give it back? What if that employee keeps it? This could even tie into why it shows up as a Faz-Wrench later. We don't see anyone else use Faz-Wrenches in Security Breach, so personally at this point, I'm not convinced that Fazbear Entertainment actually made Faz-Wrenches. Rather, this was just something that this employee customized to throw off any suspicion while they were working at the Pizzaplex. But it also makes you question, was there a time in between Security Breach and Ruin where the Pizzaplex was open again? Because everything was left exactly how it was after Gregory leaves, even down to like walkie-talkies being in the exact position that they were in during Security Breach. There are some things that are moved around, but none of it seems to hint at any kind of employee work being done. So clearly the building hasn't been open between now and then as far as I'm concerned, which makes the Faz-Wrench even stranger. Why did this character change the data diver to look like this? How I see things is that this character has been working behind the scenes for quite a while, likely ever since the events of Security Breach wrapped up. And now that the Pizzaplex is in ruins, we're seeing what was actually going on behind the scenes. And there's a whole bigger story here. One of my problems with this whole idea though is that by the time of Ruin, we're not using key cards anymore to unlock things. We're literally just using this Faz-Wrench. So I don't understand why there would be such a switch from this technology, which is technically more primitive, to having the security clearance cards and whatnot in Security Breach. When Security Breach supposedly happens before Ruin, makes you wonder, doesn't it? One other thing we'd have to think about then, Cassie's dad would be too old by that point to have had a child, right? And my response to that is, not necessarily. People can have kids at all ages, but just as importantly, Carney mentions that it looks like we have kids, and I've never understood why that's been important unless it relates to Cassie's dad or some other parental figure. And then the last part, maybe the most important, is that we don't know for sure everything about our FNAF timelines. We're pretty confident that we have it all down, but we might be wrong. There's so many things at FNAF that aren't what they seem, and I think it's good to keep an open mind with the timeline as well. I know it can suck when we're trying to theorize things and we want a timeline so that we can put the events in the proper order, but sometimes things aren't what they seem in this series. It happens so often. So just keep an open mind with that. And so to kind of put that whole theory aside, I do want to bring up the idea that in previous FNAF games, multiple endings can all be true in a sense. Like how in Security Breach, all of the endings in Security Breach didn't necessarily happen, but they're still relevant in the fact that they would have happened if things had progressed further that direction. We know that characters like Tangle and Burntrap still existed, at least in the sense of Burntrap being drawn by Gregory and Tangle literally being present in the Pizzaplex. It's the same in Help Wanted 2. It's like Vanny kills Glitchtrap with our help, but we also get killed by Glitchtrap in a different ending and give Cassie the mask. Both of those things likely happened, even though they're two different endings. So in the same way, I think it's possible that multiple endings would or could have happened in Secret of the Mimic. But that's essentially all I wanted to bring up today. I think there is a good chance that we're playing as Cassie's dad, and that Cassie's dad is, in fact, Arnold. Now, how the rest of that plays out is a whole nother discussion. And of course, on the other side, I could be completely wrong. I don't really care either way if I'm right or wrong. I just want to know what all these connections actually mean and where the story is trying to take us. But I do think it's worth pointing out these things because there are enough pieces of evidence here that I think we can try to tie this to Cassie's dad. But let me know what you think, because I know I have some pretty bad takes on FNAF. But if you enjoyed the content, feel free to like, subscribe, and I will hopefully see you in the comments down below or in another live stream sometime soon.